even on video, I thought, crap, what did I do to make the director so angry at me? But I decided to change my perception a bit, and now when I leave this room, I can always say, hey, I followed Ken Robinson at a TED Talk. So that's a pretty cool thing. I'm here to talk to you today about several revelations that I've had in my life that have led to a lifetime of revolution. I come from a very small town in Kentucky. And when I say small, I mean about the size of this room. Probably more people in this room right now than in my hometown. One of those towns that you might consider a dot on a map. Now, don't get excited or misled by the size of the dot on that map, okay? This is my hometown. Being from a small area has a lot of pros and cons. One of the great things is that it's a very tight-knit community, and everybody knows everything about you. And one of the absolute worst things is it's a tight-knit community, and everybody knows everything about you. In Kentucky, in the rural part especially, athletics is king. If you don't play sports, or all sports, then you're put in a subcategory and you're kind of looked down upon. They say in Kentucky you're born with a basketball in your hand, which I always thought was a little unfair to our moms, and I feel really bad about that. But luckily with time and gravity, I realized that I wasn't going to be a basketball player, but I learned that I could really perform well in the baseball field, and that became my identity. That's who I was. I was Mark the baseball player. And I wore that as a badge, I wore that as a shield, I wore that as a mask. Because another reason I played is, and one thing that the community didn't know, is during that time, I was surviving some pretty horrible abuse as a kid. Mentally, spiritually, physically. And I used baseball as a way to hide. That's where I placed my worth, on my physical ability. So eventually, my mom moved my brother and I to Tallahassee so that I could play baseball at Florida State, which was fantastic. But when I got here my senior year of high school, I got injured, and I lost my dream. And I didn't have a plan B at all. And that was horrible. I lost my shield. I lost my mask. I lost who I was. I was no longer Mark the baseball player. And I felt horrible because my family moved here for me. So I got really dark and scary for a while. I grew my hair long, I started drinking a lot, I started self-medicating regularly, and I got as far down that path as I could get without hurting myself or somebody else. Luckily, I have a great mom, I can't say that enough. She grabbed me by the long hair and she said, "You're better than this." So she bought me a book by a guy named Zig Ziglar. Are you familiar with Zig Ziglar? Fantastic guy. Called See You at the Top. Now, again, I considered myself a physical being, not an academic, so I didn't want a book. I used it to level a chair in my bedroom or something for a while, I don't know. But eventually, one day, I was ready. And I picked that book up and I opened it, and the light bulb went on. And I took two main things from that book. One, there's always another way. I'm not just one-dimensional. I'm made up of a whole lot of great things that come together to make me who I am. Two, who do you think's in charge of that other way? This guy. I'm in charge of it. That was so empowering for me. I put the book down and I started devouring everything I could about all of those other domains or dimensions of my life, the spiritual, the mental, the emotional, all of those things that I had completely ignored before. And the funny part was, I was an honor student. I was part of the Commonwealth program in Kentucky, which is the honor program in the state. I never even saw myself in that way. I just was an athlete. So I went out and I decided, hey, you know what? I want to become a caregiver. I want to give back. I want to help other people avoid the mistakes that I've made. So I finished my degree at Florida State. I enrolled in massage therapy school just down the street here at the Core Institute. And that was my second revelation. It was the first time I was introduced to safe touch. And that changed everything. I started to rebuild my physical self, which was huge. It was this dark void that I carried with me for a long time. So that led to working with elite athletes. And it led to another degree in exercise science, one in sports medicine. And the more I learned working with injured athletes, the more I learned that it's not about the physical. A big portion of it is mental and emotional. And that was huge. That was huge. In 2004, I was asked to apply to go to Athens for the Olympics. And massage capacity. And I applied. I got my application in late. Old habits die hard, I guess. And I couldn't go to the Olympics. But they said, hey, we have this thing called the Paralympics. Would you like to go to that? I said, I have no idea what that is. And they explained to me it's an elite performance for people with physical limitations, physical challenges, disability. And I thought, wow, that's perfect. That's what I want to do. So in 2004, I went to the Paralympics, and another light bulb went on, another path lit up. And I learned some very valuable lessons. This is Revelation 3. It's not about your physical. These folks could not hide behind anything physical. I mean, Jeff Fabry here, he can't hide behind anything. It's apparent. But what it allows me to do is see inside who he is intrinsically. And that was powerful. I learned that sometimes you have to lose a part of yourself to become whole. It was exactly what I had gone through in a different capacity. I needed that. It changed my perception. It changed my outlook on the world. I came back rejuvenated. I was excited. I wanted to work with folks with physical disabilities. So I decided that I didn't want to just work with the physical anymore. I wanted to know about the mental and emotional workings. I went back to grad school and I got a degree in sport and exercise psychology. It was perfect. So when I left grad school, my professor shook my hand and he said, Mark, nobody else in the world has the education and experience that you have, but you're never going to find a home for it. Oh. Crushed. I was crushed. So I started taking lesser jobs. I believed him. And I started looking at all my weaknesses. Maybe this is really who I am. Until one day the phone rang and someone said, hey, there's this new program. The military is starting to use performance psychology. You should join up. So I called, I applied, and I was asked to come to the U.S. Military Academy to do a presentation on my grad school work, which is all about mental skills training for folks with physical disability. So I walked in a room at West Point, which is an amazing, amazing campus. And it was full of senior officers, businessmen. I plugged my jump drive in, started going through the slides. About 6 minutes later, the lights came on, and the guy stood up in the back and said, that's enough. And I thought, I blew it. But then he said, you know what? We're starting a new program to use mental skills training for wounded warriors and their families. And we want you to lead that. That was huge. That was huge. Based on your experiences and your education, we have a home for you here if you want it. It was a game changer. So since 2007, I've been the master trainer for my program as far as our work with wounded, ill, and injured soldiers. I'm a liaison to the Warrior Transition Command. I sit in their office in D.C., and I'm surrounded by an amazing team. Amazing team. We're the largest employer of sports psychology professionals in the world. And we go out every quarter and offer these services to about 10,000 soldiers, family, and their cadre members. Okay? It's amazing. We help them look at healing as a performance, transition as a performance, which has never been done before. How can they be better all around in their life, not just as a soldier? How can you be better at everything you do consistently when it matters? Okay? I work with things such as the Warrior Games, which happens in a couple of weeks. All branches come together and they compete in a Paralympic-style event. They're wounded, ill, and injured. And I'm the director of mental training for the Army team, which is fantastic. This is exactly what I was doing in grad school that I was told I would never do outside of grad school. What I've learned in all of my experience is that we're made up of a lot of small, beautiful pieces that come together to create something amazing, like a mosaic. Okay, so if we look at someone just as this, we're doing them a disservice. We need to look at everything that goes on inside. We need to look at ourselves like that as well. There are a lot of models out there about holistic care, wellness, from the basic 3-prong model, mind, body, spirit, to I've seen as many as 20 dimensions or domains. People say, Mark, which is the right one? That's for you to decide. The Warrior Transition Command has a model that consists of 6 for their soldiers, and it's very applicable to what they're going through in healing and transition, okay? They look at their career. They look at all of the things that help them perform in a professional capacity. Social, how can you create and maintain strong relationships that you can trust? Emotional, how do you create energy and optimism, enthusiasm as you go forward in life? Family performances, how do I be a better dad, a better mom? a better brother, better sister, better father. Physical, which I've mentioned several times. How do I perform physically on a consistent basis? And finally, spiritual. And I wanted to take a second to talk about that because this one scares people. This one scares people a lot. It's not bad to talk about spiritual wellness because spiritual wellness doesn't necessarily equate to religion, okay? I'm a religious person. But the nucleus of spiritual wellness comes down to 3 pillars: values, relationships, and the pursuit of a higher purpose. Please raise your hand if you perform in one of those areas, if not more of those areas, every day. If those areas are a big part of your life. Almost everyone in here. If you're religious, your religion is most likely founded on those tenets. But if you're not religious, you can still have a high level of spiritual wellness. Okay, please understand that. Use these as a guide, but it's important to look inside yourself to see what you're made of. What makes you who you are and makes you great? It's important to identify these things to avoid a couple of pitfalls. The first is kind of the inch-deep, mile-wide model, where you're so involved in so many things and you have so much going on that you really can't devote enough of yourself to any single thing. Okay? You're trying to be everything all the time. And in essence, you're being nothing any of the time. Okay? The second takes us back to my friend Sisyphus, where we focus so much on one thing, we put all of our energy, all of our resources, all of our time into one area of our life. And I chose career because this is one I see a lot. I focus so much on my career that I don't have time. I don't have good health in any of those other domains. I let them go. They suffer. And this was me back in the day, but I could just exchange that for physical. When I was in my dark and scary phase, I didn't take care of myself. I had horrible relationships. I pushed people away. I was so angry all the time. I was still focused on the physical, but I knew that it was broken. So it's important to look within yourself and see what else you're made of. When people come in to do any sort of performance enhancement technique, whether it be goal setting or energy management or anything like that, I first sit down and say, hey, it doesn't matter to me up front if you're a musician or an athlete or a surgeon or a soldier. I care more about you as a human being. Let's start with looking inside yourself. I want you to identify those areas of your life, those dimensions, those domains that make you who you are. I can't do that for you. It's up to you. So I have them list them across the board. And then the first step is usually, let's look at the challenges that you face in each of those domains. I know, Johnny Raincloud, let's look at your weaknesses. But that's so important. So important because looking at your weaknesses makes you competent. It identifies the holes in the ship and allows you to plug those so that you can move forward. I bet this would be an easy list for you guys to make because this is how we think a lot of the times. We talk to ourselves this way constantly. I don't want to mess up. I would talk to her, but she might laugh at me. We're always doing this. I don't want to fail this test. So I have people address those challenges today. How are you going to do that now? Not 6 weeks from now, but today. How can you address those? How can you build on those? How can you make those stronger so that you can move forward and be great? This isn't the hard part of the process, folks. This is the next step. Ask them to look at their strengths. Show of hands if you have sat down and looked at the things that you were really good at in the last year. You've made a list of all of your strengths. Much smaller participation than the last question I asked. Why is that? We're socialized not to look at our strengths, but to focus on our weaknesses. Think back to when you were a kid. If you were like me, I heard this a lot. Go to your room and don't come out till you think about what you've done wrong. Right? It's ingrained in us from an early age. How different might things have been if you heard, go to your room and don't come out till you think about what you've done right? That's huge. So then how are you going to celebrate those strengths today? I guarantee you, if you sit down and you make this list, you've already celebrated your strengths. And we live in a society that says, hey, if you do this, you're cocky, you're arrogant. You know, I'm not asking you to posture these strengths towards anybody. I'm asking you to just celebrate what you already have, who you already are. There's no shame in that. And then build this into how you talk to yourself, how you present yourself to others. And what you'll see is that just like the weaknesses build your competence, this is going to help you build your confidence in every area of your life. Do you think that that's going to help create overall well-being? Do you think that that's going to help you perform better? Absolutely. So then you can start applying it to other areas of your life, things you want to do, whether it's a career goal or dream, whether it's something with your family, or it's some monumental physical, personal goal that you want to accomplish. You can build these things in and go into it with more confidence. You already know what your limitations are, how you need to change those. You already know what your strengths are, what you're bringing to the table that are going to make you great. This will help you become emotionally connected. I'm going to give you a quick example. I'm not a math guy. I'd have to take my shoes off to count to 20. Okay? So keep up with the numbers. I don't know if I can keep repeating them. I have 2 buildings, 50 stories high, 50 feet apart. Okay, everybody with me? I've got a metal beam the same dimensions as a 2x4 running rooftop to rooftop. How many of you would walk heel-toe knowing that there's no safety net, the wind can gust at any time, 50 stories, 50 feet, for $100? Show of hands. Nobody. 200, one person. 200, 500, 1,000. Guys, I work for the government. I can't keep going up. Okay, let me change the stakes. The person that you care most about, the person that Tegan mentioned earlier, is on that other rooftop and they're in trouble. All you have to do is walk across to save them. How many of you would do it? That's amazing. Every time I do this example, I get the same result. What changed? It's the same risk. It's the same challenge. I just changed the emotional connection, and you became instantly committed. That's what these activities that I'm showing you today, that's what that can do for you. It can help you become emotionally connected to yourself and your future endeavors. So as I leave you today, I want to follow up on the story I told you earlier. A couple of years ago, I've been staying in touch with the Ziegler Corporation. I'd sent them my story a long time ago. And a couple of years ago, I got a call from Lori Majors from the Ziegler Corporation. And she said, "Mark, this is Lori Majors." I said, "Hey, Mom, that's not funny." And she said, "If you're in Texas by any chance, Mr. Ziegler's going to be in San Antonio doing a talk, and he'd like to meet you." And I said, "Oh, my God, I live in San Antonio right now. That's amazing." So I went to this talk, and I heard such great speakers, Colin Powell, George W. Bush, Laura Bush, they were all speaking. And they came to get me, and I walked backstage, and there was Zig Ziglar and his wife, the redhead. And I wept, uncontrollably wept. I walked up to him, and I said, "Sir, thank you." I shook his hand. I said, "What you did for me all those years ago without even knowing it allows me to pass that along to tens of thousands of other people today." I said, "I want to be the next Zig Ziglar." And he said, "Why, when you're already the first Mark Campbell?" Revelation 3. So the revolution part, we can all take part in this. When you leave here today, look inside yourself. Decide what makes you great. Okay, all of those areas who make you who you are. But then go out and help other people do that. That's how we can change the world, folks. That's how we can make a difference, by looking inside ourselves and then sharing that greatness with other people and allowing them to share it. Okay? So your homework today, when you leave tonight, I want you all to go to your room and don't come out till you think about what you've done right. Thank you.